Hey everyone, Nicole and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to tell you about the books that I've read in December of 2022 and January 2023 because that's how I do it. Don't ask, I'm just a very disorganized person. The first one that I want to talk about is The Delicate Things We Make by Milena McKay. First of all, her name reminds me of Milena from Mortal Kombat.
I'm in the mood for a quick bite.
Second of all, Milena McKay is one of the beloved authors in the lesbian women's community. So I've been really excited about her books, and I gotta say that I didn't like this one, or I didn't like it as much as I expected. I gave it 3 stars. There's not enough romance in it. There's not enough interaction between the heroines, and I'm genuinely baffled that it's a romance story because it spends so much time doing other things and these characters, they don't even interact much. So it was very difficult for me to believe that one of them fell for the other this hard and this fast when they didn't spend this much time together. Or at least the author failed to show me how they're spending their time together, because they went on dates, but instead of giving me dialogue and giving me descriptions of things that they're doing, it was described in passing. The way in the romantic comedies we sometimes see 2 characters fall in love through a falling in love montage. It works in the movies because we can visually see the chemistry between the actors, and it's something that we pick up on. But in books, I don't think so. The story is about Jamie. She's a journalist, but her career took a plunge, and now she's working as a barman. It's not a job that she particularly likes, but it's the job that pays the bills. And with her boyfriend dumping her for an Instagram model, she has to figure out how to pay for rent. But suddenly she's given a chance to get back on the horse because one of her past employers is giving her an opportunity to write an article on 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝔸𝕃, a reclusive artist who people don't know much about. 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸 doesn't have a face or a name. She only has a nickname. It is indeed a she, as we figure out later. And Jamie is the one that is supposed to figure out the actual persona behind the artist. What's particularly interesting about 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸 is not that she doesn't tell the world who she actually is. It's also that her art is incredibly influential in the fashion world, and a lot of the art that she came up with inspired fashion designers around the world. Jamie takes the job and discovers that 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸 is a middle-aged woman who is hiding from the world because of the traumatic past experiences that she had in the industry. And when she spends 0 to none time with her, she falls head over heels and is obsessed with 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸. She now wants to bring everyone that hurt her in the past to their knees and develops a revenge plan. As I said, my biggest gripe with the story is that it has insta-love and that it spends more time developing the plot than developing the relationship. When the book is marketed as a romance, I would like to see a bit more romance in it. Plus, because we spent so little time with 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸, except from the traumatic experiences that happened to her when she was young, trigger warning for sexual assault and rape, it's very hard to understand why Jamie fell in love with her, because the author failed to present 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸 in a way that would make her an appealing partner. And I'm not saying that the love interest has to be perfect, they are not allowed to have any issues or such things, but I'm saying there should be an understanding for me as a reader why this specific character is attracted to this other specific character. And I think it was done very poorly in this book. This story overall was interesting, plot-wise, but the romance was not it. Plus, I genuinely think that, considering that Jamie didn't have much experience prior investigating cases like this. She definitely had a really simple time with it. 3 stars from me. If you enjoyed this book, tell me why. Also, maybe you read other work by Milena McKay, because she has some other books that are also beloved, and I'm a little bit, like a tiny bit scared that they are not that good either. Tell me. Share your opinions in the comments. Then I picked up Tessa there. I knew she's going to deliver. And the book that attracted my attention is *Romancing the Duke, which I believe is the first in the Castles Ever After series. I'm really bad with reading Tessa Dare in order because I just want to read the books that sound appealing to me and they're not connected in any way, so who cares? *Romancing the Duke follows Isolde, whose father was a very famous author of children fantasy books, I want to say. It very much sounded like Lord of the Rings or the Narnia books. He was very beloved, had a very big fan club, and he's been always telling others that he's been inspired by his daughter Isolde. She needed good fairy tales to fall asleep to and good stories in general to entertain her. Sadly, these books also affected how Isolde lived her life, because people expected her to be like the character in the book that has been written based on her. In general, there has been a bit of an issue with boundaries, and she's been struggling with it. When her father died and left her absolutely nothing, she had to fend for herself, struggle with shelter and food, until one of her other relatives also died and left her a castle. When she arrives to the castle thinking that all the trouble that she had is behind her, she meets Ransom. Ransom is a duke. He's been injured in a duel, and he struggles with his eyesight and also with some scars that fighting in the duel left him. And he still believes that the castle belongs to him. He doesn't understand how it was sold when he's still alive and is supposedly the owner of the castle. Neither Isolde or Ransom are ready to leave the premises, and they have to cohabitate until they figure out what to do with the property and why the castle was sold in the first place, and if Isolde actually has a claim to it. Because they cohabitate, they spend a lot of time with each other, they become very close, and sparks start to fly. The only question remains who the property actually belongs to, and if that issue is going to affect the relationship. I genuinely really love this premise because I love the idea of people having a random meeting. I am not a big fan of the modern dating culture, but you know, we have what we have. So it was fun to see their clashing personalities while they tried to conflict manage. This premise also allowed for one of my favorite romance tropes, which is forced proximity. And Tessa Dare also delved a little bit more deeply into property law, which was interesting. It was an interesting side of this historical setting. I love knowing more, so that was fun. I also found the relationship pretty sweet, although they have not started on a right foot with each other. Vulnerability is my kryptonite in romances. If you've watched me for a while now, you know that. I also loved the nuanced representation of disability in this book. The representation of blindness was very interesting because when we talk about blind people, there's an expectation that they lost 100% of their sight, and that is why we call them blind. Being legally blind actually includes other people as well. For example, people that lost most of their sight, but they still see shadows and light, and depending on the time of the day, they're seeing more or less. That is how Ransom was described, and I appreciated that Tessa Dare had given us a little bit of a more nuanced representation in that area. In December also, I wanted to read some Christmas romances. I'm not a big fan of Christmas. I don't celebrate it. I celebrate the New Year's. But Christmas is that big capitalist holiday that people are writing for and releasing movies for, so I had to settle for Christmas. Knowing myself, I decided to do a reading vlog to keep myself accountable, and also I only picked queer Christmas romances because I knew that this way I would be more invested. So the book that was definitely a success is Kiss Who Runs For Me by Alison Cochrun. I love this. I think it was not overly tropey like Hallmark movies tend to be like, and it was also grounded in characters that felt real. They felt authentic in their struggles, and also they spoke like real people. Have you seen a Hallmark movie recently? Because they talk like robots. The story is about Ellie and Jack. Ellie is failing at her job as an animator. She moved to Portland specifically to do that. On the Christmas Eve, Ellie meets a woman named Jack, with whom she has a very flirtatious rapport, so she decides to go for it. They spend a whole day together and end up hooking up, but the next day something happens to them and they go their separate ways without telling us, the readers, what actually occurred. A year passes and Ellie was fired from her animation job. She works as a barista and she hates it. The salary is horrible. She barely keeps on to her apartment, and when she asks for a raise from her boss, they deny her. In a very serendipitous how do you pronounce that? Anyway, in a very miraculous turn of events, the owner of the building that the coffee house is in is sort of hanging around in the coffee shop. He's there often. His name is Andrew, he's hot and rich, and Ellie has a tiny bit of a crush on him. So they spend some time together and Ellie tells him that she's struggling financially. He offers her a very untraditional way out of her situation. He offers to marry him because he needs a fake wife to claim his inheritance. The perfect way to introduce her to his family, in his opinion, is to spend the holidays at his house. And she agrees because she doesn't really have any plans for the holidays. She doesn't have supportive family. And when she arrives, she meets Jack again, who the family calls Jacqueline. Turns out that Jack, or Jacqueline, is actually Andrew's sister. And the matter of the one night stand and the one day together that they spent a year ago is not resolved. I realized that the premise sounds very much like all the romances you've read in the past. I think what makes the story very strong is how rooted these characters are in reality, how authentic they feel, how I could imagine them as real people, and how successfully Alison Cochrun convinces the readers to believe that these two, Ellie and Jack, could fall in love with each other in one day. Honestly, fall in love is a big claim, but I've been on these kinds of dates and they do feel like you're falling in love. It's something to do with chemistry, definitely, because you spend a lot of time with a new person, and when you start sharing vulnerable deals about yourself with this person that you're attracted to, of course the emotions run high. I discussed it a little bit in my reading vlog. It's definitely a very realistic scenario in my opinion, because I've experienced a lighter version of that in my life. But what they do next is what's important in this romance, how they deal with the situation in the present timeline, and how they start to uncover who they actually are in front of each other. They are uncovering the things that they have not told in the past timeline, and some of the things were actually very surprising. This book has real plot twists. This is an example of a good holiday romance, in my opinion. If you read this book, tell me in the comments down below which one you liked best. The first debut book by Alison Cochrun, or this one, because I think this one is my favorite. The book that was more of a fail in that video is You're the Mean One, Matthew Prince by Janovsky. I think it was much more Hallmark and cliche than I wanted it to be. The story follows a guy named Matthew who is in his early 20s and is a Richie Rich type of character. Do you remember this movie? Because that movie was my jam when I was a child. Anyway, he has a lot of money, privilege, he is used to being in a specific group of extra privileged people and to deal with them. So when he makes a mistake of buying an island on his parents' money and is booted to his grandparents without sufficient funds and his friends, he has to reevaluate his life. It's a tale as old as time, a rich person humbled, and I was ready to enjoy it, especially because when he arrives at his grandparents' house, he meets Hector. Hector, the very gifted student of his grandfather, who has a grant for education but doesn't have the funding to find lodgings. So Matthew's grandparents offer a place for him in their own house. To add salt to the wound, Matthew won't only stay in his grandparents' house, which he doesn't like. He's also going to stay in the same room as Hector because his grandparents don't have any other space left, and they're going to share. Drum roll, please. A bang bed. When I tell you I was extremely excited for that development of the plot, because it promised me conflict, it promised me unresolved sexual tension, it promised me opposites attract, and while it was still opposites attract, I don't think that the other elements delivered. The con of this book is that it follows a classic Hallmark trajectory. They are doing a project together. The project is supposed to get all the townspeople together, and this project also is supposed to absolve Matthew from his, unthoughtful decisions. I'm personally not a big fan of this trope in Christmas movies. I think it's overplayed and silly. There were other egregious plot points that were plucked straight from Hallmark movies. One of them, and it will seem like a random small thing that you can absolutely ignore, but these kinds of things usually stack up. Matthew had anxiety, and he called his anxiety demon Krampus because it made so much sense. We're definitely and undeniably a society that celebrates Christmas every single day of the year. We are fully dedicated to Christmas and we know nothing but Christmas. It's really dumb, and it's what I expect from a Hallmark-inspired romance. So I didn't like the plot of the book, and I didn't like the atmosphere of it. Another story that I loved from that video is Being Married by Meka James. Now, I have a very successful like to dislike read when it comes to Meka James. As in, I liked every single thing that I read from her, which is 2 novellas. Being Married is just really good. She knows how to deliver a really good, sexy romance. So, the story follows Noelle and Lennox. I had to look it up. Noelle is moving states for a job. She is a child doctor. Her work is very stressful and difficult. On top of that, with the moving, she doesn't really have a place to stay yet, and she doesn't know many people. Her co-worker and friend offers her a place at her cousin's apartment, and Noelle, even though she's uncomfortable because she doesn't know the cousin, agrees because she doesn't really want to leave in the hotel, especially to stay in the hotel during the holidays. Noelle meets Lennox, the owner of the apartment, and they do not get along straight away. But eventually, obviously, they fall in love with each other because it's a romance. And what I loved about this is, despite it being heavier on the Christmas holiday theme compared to Kiss Runs for Me, for example, it also explained it well. It explained why Noel really loved the holidays, and it didn't seem like the holidays were the most important part of the story. Noelle loved the holidays because she has this very high-stress job. She also likes to wear very happy, colorful clothing, which is something Lennox is teasing her for at first. But it's good that it's baked into the character. It makes sense for her to love the holidays because of the career that she has. That is what I like about Meka James. She has a very good hold on her characters. The last book in that video was Silent Night by Lily Seabrooke, and while it was very much toothless and non-offensive, I kind of hated it because it reminded me why I hate holiday-themed media and reboots, remakes, etc., etc., because it's trying to play on your nostalgia and it's giving you crap instead of respecting the things that you genuinely love. I don't think that the characters were well developed or distinct. I didn't love the idea that this small town is obsessed with these two girls getting together because I just didn't feel the vibes. I didn't feel like these characters had any chemistry. It felt lifeless. The story is about Brooke, who is a country singer. She's getting back to her small town to see her family on the holidays, and she re-meets her childhood friend named Nicole, who's also queer and decided to stay in this small town and take over the local bakery. Their families think that they are perfect for each other because they're both queer, which honestly is so annoying. And suddenly Brooke herself remembers how she sort of maybe had a crush on Nicole back in the day and how she thought Nicole was the shit. It's interesting because before she met her, she never mentioned her, and I call bullshit on all that because if you were in love with your childhood best friend, you would mention it, I guess. You would think about it more, you would talk about it more. And I don't think that this book convinced me that these characters were in love back in the day and that they were in love now in the present timeline. Another novella that was definitely not Christmas or holiday themed, even though I knew the end, by Polk, was very close to becoming a favorite. I definitely need to read more Polk because I do have her stuff and I've been, dancing around it. But I for sure need to get into that because I love the writing style and I loved Polk's imagination. Even though I knew the end is short, but it packs a punch, and I found the setting very, very interesting. It merged the things that I really like. In terms of the atmosphere, it reminded me a lot of Constantine, the movie. Okay, so the story is about a warlock who is the investigator of the supernatural. She's really good at her job, and she is a private contractor. Warlocks in this world are magical users that made a deal with a demon, which makes them an outcast in the magical institutions. She knows that she doesn't have a lot of time to live. Her 10 years are coming to an end, but she's trying to figure out how to make the most money and make sure that her girlfriend won't need for anything when she's gone. One of the heroine's past employers offers her a job to find a White City vampire. In exchange for finding the White City vampire, she's going to get a shit ton of money. While investigating, she meets a lot of past friends and enemies, and she figures out that the White City vampire might be doing something more dangerous than they all expected. All these demons, angels, warlocks, and the way they are described reminded me a lot of the Constantine. The world building was pretty great. I got attached to the heroine and her girlfriend so fast. And I also really loved how Polk blended the historical setting with the magical elements. She also managed to establish all that in a very short span of pages, and while the story felt complete, I would not mind at all if she decided to expand the universe. I've read a lot of novellas. I was trying to finish off my reading challenge. So, the novella that pissed me off was 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝔸𝕃 for 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝔸𝕃 by Becky Chambers. It really got on my nerves. And the more I think about it, the more it gets on my nerves. Because when the authors are trying to pretend that they're giving me an adult book and are definitely writing children's books, didactic children's books, instead, it's an issue for me. If you told me that this book was supposed to be a picture book, I would believe you, because Becky Chambers works double shifts at the banging over your head with an intrusive messages that she personally believes in. It's not that I completely disagree with all the things that she wants to talk about. It's that she's so annoying that I want to kick my legs in protest just out of spite. It's difficult to explain, but I always had issues with people that are trying to bulldoze over me with their opinion. No thank you, I have my own. I don't need your opinion. Anyway, this novella is interesting. I would say it's a sci-fi utopia, but at the same time, I'm left with a lot of questions that I don't think a lot of people that give this book 5 stars to ask themselves or ask this book. The story follows a character that lives in a sort of Buddhist monastery and who starts itching. They don't really know what to do with their life. They're not particularly satisfied with it, or they stopped being satisfied with it. So they decide to change jobs, and they asked to be trained to be tea monk. A tea monk is sort of a fill-in for a therapist who offers people that are struggling a cup of good tea and their listening ear. Why can't the people in your family listen to you? They don't explain. So the protagonist takes on the new job and they want to be the best tea monk ever, but they soon start experiencing the itching again. So they decide to go into the wilderness. The factories at some point were completely operated by robots, and at some point later, robots gained consciousness. So they asked the humans to let them go, and humans let them go. Idealistic, naive, but we're rolling with it. You gotta see why I think this story is for children though. No conflict there, they just let the robots go, and they also populate only a small percentage of the planet, leaving the wild creatures and the wilderness to mind their own. They're not building anything there, they don't live there, and they don't even visit. The thing though, it seems like it's not that they have just left swaths of territory untouched. They're also scared of it, and they don't have much survival skills too. In the wilderness, they meet a robot named 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝔸𝕃, and they start traveling with 𝕊𝕆𝕀𝕸𝕃 in hopes of finding the real purpose of the human being and failing miserably at it. It's pseudo-philosophical. It poses a question of what people actually need to be happy, and it fails to answer. It's also trying to comment on burnout. I think that was the most successful part of the story. Everything else was questionable. First of all, to leave this much of wilderness behind and to live only in specific areas, the humanity must have dealt with some really scary eco-fascist event. And I don't see people talking about it enough when they're talking about this book. There must be a significant shortage of the population because of something. And we just don't talk about that. The way the robot speaks and is in general is a massive cliche, because we get angry robots that want to kill humanity, and we get childlike robots that are wise because their view of the world is childlike. The robot in this book is childlike. The book is trying to say that the purpose of the human being is to exist, to eat and shed and sleep and fuck. And in my opinion, that is really faulty, because people also can create. What this novella does, perhaps unconsciously, is equals humans to animals. Perhaps it's consciously. By creating a world that basically doesn't have any conflict or drive, Becky Chambers takes the biggest reason why people and civilizations develop. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that I have not felt like the protagonist is a human. It felt like the protagonist is an alien. They didn't feel human enough and adult enough for the age that they are. In general, as I've told you, the novella feels very childish for me. I'm a big fan of other Becky Chambers work, but here I think she dropped the ball. My other foray into Tessa Dare's backlist was with The Wallflower Wager. It's about a woman named Penelope, and I want to say Gabrielle. Penelope is a kind soul. She's a vegan, and she really loves animals. She shelters them. She has a variety of different animals that are just living in her castle. And Gabrielle is the opportunist who's been buying the property of indebted high society people, refurbishing it and selling it for more. He bought a property alongside Penelope, hoping to sell it well, because Penelope is of gentry, and a lot of up-and-coming businessmen like to be near the gentry even though they don't have the titles themselves. The problem is Penelope has so many animals that smell and bleed and, you know, causing a ruckus, that he doesn't believe that he would be able to sell. Penelope also receives a letter from her relatives that says her brother wants her to leave with a chaperone. It's improper for her to leave alone, even though she is a spinster, and that she has to move from the castle soon. She hates the idea and proposes a different decision that sadly also includes her getting rid of the animals. So both Penelope and Gabrielle want to find new homes for these animals. It's in both of their interests, and while they are apprehensive of each other and don't agree on the process overall, they have to work together. I really like this. I think it was humorous. I think the situation was fun. I loved Penelope. The only reason why I didn't give it 5 stars is because closer to the end of the story, the hero does something that, in my opinion, is unforgivable. So I struggled to like him after that, but for Penelope and for how the relationship developed in the first part, I give this 4 stars. I really enjoyed Tessa Dare. I like most of her stuff. There definitely have been some wild 3-star books, but for most part, I'm giving her books 4 and 5 stars consistently. This is not my favorite in the series. My favorite is The Governor's Game, definitely, and I'm really looking forward to the last book in the series that is coming out at some point. It's been pushed a lot. This was fun. It was everything I needed from it, and I enjoyed it. I don't know what else to say. So that is when my December ended. I read 55 books out of 60, failed at my reading challenge, but who cares? And then in January, I only read 3 books. And it's a miracle that I've read 3, because at some point I thought I'm going to end up with 1 read book, which is unheard of. The first book that I finished in January was The Prince and the Assassin by Tavia Lark, and I just liked it. I really did. I think that it's one of those books that makes me dislike KU, Kindle Unlimited. Every single person that has a story written down can publish it on Kindle Unlimited, and no one can say anything about it. Obviously, no one can say anything about it, but what I mean is we need editors. The main issue that I had with this is that it's extremely mediocre, to the point of it pissing me off. It's a fantasy, and it follows Whisper and Julian. Whisper is an assassin that works for a secret assassin organization. His owner, they call him father, I believe, took a drop of their blood, and now he can control the people that are in his employ. So Whisper has to do a number of jobs to be allowed a wish. But he also has a friend, a younger girl that also is trained to be an assassin, and he believes that she deserves a better life and is not good for this type of job. So when another order comes through, Whisper decides that he's going to ask from their father to let this girl go, that he's going to complete another round of orders and then ask for his freedom. The target that he's appointed for is unusual because he's more about direct, quick hits, but in this case he's asked to infiltrate into the guard of one of the princes in the kingdom. His name is Julian, and to kill Julian specifically when his employer asks him to. So he has a period of time where he has to pretend to be someone else. But of course, because he spends time with Julian and realizes how sweet and nice he actually is, he hesitates. They fall in love, and it's an issue. Now, this does sound good, doesn't it? And the cover is beautiful. But the way this order writes the story is as if she's writing fan fiction about the characters that we know about a lot already, and we don't know anything about this character, so why? She employs a lot of early fanfiction descriptions too, which were annoying, because who in their right mind in the modern times talks about unusual eyes or hair in fantasy novels? It's so cheesy and cliche and bad. It pissed me off immediately. But I was resolute. I needed to finish this book and see what it's all about. I don't know if it was wise because I really disliked it. So while it starts in a very interesting way, it very quickly unravels. We are supposed to believe that these characters have an instant attraction and they fall in love very quickly. I didn't believe that, because all the moments where the order could push for more vulnerability and intimacy, she missed the mark. Whisper, who is supposedly an assassin with a lot of experience, has a voice of a 14-year-old boy. Julian is very basic too, and their romance has zero chemistry. You're sort of supposed that they are good together and supposed to be together because the order needs to write a romance story, and she's telling you that they are going to be, without actually showing the connection, like the actual connection. So, no thank you. To add salt to the wound, she cannot write a sex scene to save her life. They're all horrible. They're really, really bad. They're neither sexy or emotional or romantic. The way she describes things is very awkward. I found the sex scenes extremely uncomfortable. You would expect that the plot would have a better chance with a very basic, mediocre romance, but it's not really good either. It starts in an interesting way, but the order downgrades to cliches and to mustache-twirling villains. Every single thing that happened in this book, I predicted. It didn't feel like a good fantasy story, and it didn't feel like a good romance. I was very disappointed in this one, but I started the second book because I love to torture myself. I actually wanted to see if she will improve. I think she did a little bit. At least the characters feel like they are older. But overall, I still don't think that these are good books. We're going to talk about this second book next month because I have not finished it in time. By the way, adult men don't call each other kitten because it's cringe. No one actually calls each other kitten. I could see a situation where you'd call a child kitten, like a small child, but not adults. It's weird. I decided to pick up It Happened One Autumn by Kleypas. I've read Kleypas before. I knew that she's a master of her genre, and I wanted to read a good historical romance. I wanted to read a good romance in general. So, It Happened One Autumn features Lillian, who we got to know in the first book, and a guy named Marcus. If you don't know what the series is about, it's about these 4 women that realize that they are soon going to be spinsters if they're not going to marry, and no one really pays attention to them, so they join forces in finding husbands for each other. So Lillian is the American girl. She has a younger sister and she struggles with her manners because her parents want to marry her off to gentry because they want the title, and she herself doesn't really fit into that society yet. Marcus is one of the guys we also met in the first book, I believe. I have not paid much attention to him, but he personally really wants the proper British wife that is going to know everything there's to know about proper manners and is just going to fit him as a partner. He doesn't really want to find a person that he's going to fall in love with because that's not his goal. He wants to achieve a proper union in the eyes of high society. Obviously, it's a belief that was formed by where he is from and also by his family members, specifically by his mother. Lillian obviously is not perfect for that, for his goals, but he finds that their headbutting and conflicts give him something, some energy that he didn't expect. He also finds her very attractive, and she also, despite how different they are, finds him attractive as well. It's an interesting story because it has enough plot development. There are some plot twists, some twists and turns, which I loved, but Kleypas does a really good job warming me up to the character of Marcus. I really didn't like him at first because there is a scene where he humiliates Lillian, and that is such a turn off for me. If someone humiliates me in public, that's it. We're cutting ties. I'm no longer going to speak to you. This was especially hurtful because it was from a potential romantic interest. But I warmed up to him either way because of how he started behaving later, and also because of how when he realized that he is really into Lillian, he was down for her. And I love it when the love interest is just down for the person that they are in love with. But at the same time, I knew that Kleypas knows her shit, so why was I surprised? Anyway, there are a few scenes that I loved. There is a scene in the library where Lillian drinks a little bit too much, and they have a very honest conversation about their feelings. It just felt so earnest and so intimate, and at the same time it was funny. And I think people sometimes disregard humor, but it gives our lives levity and our relationships with others as well. The way I felt about Marcus took a real turn, and I love this. I love that this author managed to do this. The third book in the series, I don't really know what to feel about because the character, the hero in this book is gonna be the villain from this one, and he's not simply an asshole. He also intimidated Lillian and warned that he's going to assault her, and I was not particularly just about that, obviously. So I don't know if I'm going to read the third book. I know that a lot of people love it, and I am confident that Kleypas can change my mind, but I don't know if I want my mind changed. So a dilemma. Tell me about the third book in the book. Well, tell me about the third book in the comments, obviously. The last book that I'm going to talk about, finally, I know this video is long, be patient, is Wilder Girls by Rory Power. Basically what happened is I watched the Yellow Jackets and I needed a fix. I needed to read about girls on a dangerous island. So that is what came to my mind immediately. This is an interesting book. I think a lot of people will hate it because of an open ending. It's very open. And some people love it because of the atmosphere. I loved it because of the atmosphere and because there was always this feeling of something not being told to me, of something secretive. And I was left at the end of this book with the same feeling, which I actually enjoyed because it made me think about the things that might be a secret, and it made me think about the book and the plot and the, you know, this whole thing in general. So I enjoyed it because it kind of left me with an opening, with an opportunity for me and perhaps a group of other people that have read this book as well to speculate about what happened. The story is about a private school for girls named Rockstar that is situated on an island. They've been hit with a virus called Tox, the nature of which the scientists don't understand, and which really affected the nature and the biology of the girls that have not died after contacting it. All the girls developed some traits that you would usually see in animals or plants, and that is supposedly makes them more adaptable to the life in nature. But they obviously hate it because it makes them weaker, it is not particularly pleasant looking, and also they can contract the virus again and again. They have this fits. It's sort of like a chronic illness. And when they have the fits, they develop a new trait or they die because their body can no longer take it. They are quarantined on the island and they are forbidden from wandering about. They have a very strict schedule, and the Navy provides them with some food and supplies while they are figuring out how to beat the Tox, and if it's in general could be beaten. So there are three main characters in this box. Two of them have point of views, 𝕊𝕐𝕋 and 𝕊𝕍𝕋. The story has a very interesting narration, which is, I think, Rory Power's signature, because I read her other book and it sort of was similar. She pays a lot of attention to building the atmosphere, and I appreciate it. This story was less scary than I expected because it had a lot of body gore, and I am not a big fan of that. But if you're not imagining it, it's fine. I really enjoyed this because it was fast-paced, it was full of secrets, and it was atmospheric. I wouldn't say that I was very attached to the characters, but I enjoyed them. I liked 𝕊𝕐𝕋. I liked how certain things were unsaid in terms of the relationships between these girls. You sort of had leeway and a lot of things were left to interpretations. So that was interesting too. The world building was good and it was not a lot. Rory Power managed to explain everything to me in a very short amount of page time and get to the actual plot and the story. So a lot of intrigue in this book, a lot of interesting relationship dynamics, but also if you're not down for a very, very open ending, I do not recommend. I'm down because I like thinking about the ways the story could have ended if I wrote it. So this is definitely my thing. This is it for today. It was light outside when I started and it's now the middle of the night. Tell me about the books that you've read in January and the books that you loved recently or didn't like recently. If you read any of the books that I've talked about in this video, let's discuss them in the comments down below, because why not? If you finished watching this video, and I highly doubt that a lot of people finished watching it because it is long, it's going to be long, I can feel it. Leave an emoji of a plant that you like for the wilder girls. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you soon with another video, but until then,